Financial advisor and author Hilliard MacBeth believes Canadian home prices sit on the precipice of the biggest crash ever. Puffed up by years of ultra-low borrowing rates, home values have bloated to levels so far out of sync with underlying incomes needed to support them, it's only a matter of time before one headwind or another blows the entire house of cards over. Hilliard's here now, here to discuss his book and the ideas therein. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for inviting me.
So, to kick it off, how did we get here? What or who caused this bubble, as you call it?
Well, that's a great question. You know, I think probably the availability of financing, which is unusual in Canada. Canada's unique in the world in the availability of government insurance through CMHC that allows the lenders to lend a phenomenal amount of money. And Canadian debt levels have gone from $1 trillion to $1.8 trillion just in 15 years. So that's at the household level.
So the government is mostly at fault for this, or are there other?
Well, I think the government was genuinely trying to encourage the housing market and encourage home ownership, and it started really after the Second World War. But in the last 15 years, it's kind of taken on a life of its own. It's like this monster that nobody can tame.
Right.
And the reality is, the lenders don't really take any risks, so they keep providing more and more money. I was talking to a couple 30 years old in Edmonton, and they were offered more than $600,000 in mortgage financing. To me, it's borderline insane that they should be lending that much money.
We hear so much about low rates and how that makes it easier for people to afford these loans. A lot of people say demographics are supporting this housing market. First of all, on that notion of low interest, are those proponents of the market and this low rate environment making things easier? Are they right? I mean, do we see interest rates helping the housing market along?
Well, I think it helps. Yeah, I mean, if you had a higher interest rate years ago, we had interest rates that were 10%. Well, there's no way anybody could get $600,000 in loans with interest rate at 10% unless their incomes were very high. So that's been a big part of it. But the other thing is incomes. In Alberta, where I'm from, where 23% of all the mortgage financing in Canada that's insured has been put out, which is much, much higher than the population percentage. It's been because the incomes are so much higher. So the household income in Alberta is $100,000. They can borrow a lot more money with that much income.
So we hear a lot also about how decent employment levels and immigration levels are supporting the market. You hear a lot of real estate agents tout those attributes as reasons why the market can keep going, can keep sustaining itself. How would you counter those arguments?
Well, immigration's fairly easy to counter because Canada's been a leader in the world in growth in population and immigration. But the second fastest grower in population immigration was the United States of America, and they had a boom and a bubble and a huge crash. So that doesn't really add up. The foreign investor thing is slightly different. There's people that come in and they buy primarily condos, but the problem with foreign investor money is as soon as there's any kind of a slowdown or a downturn in the market, they probably will look elsewhere in the world. They're not particularly tied to Canada. They can move their money wherever they want to move it to.
So you say home values in Canada are roughly overvalued by between 40 to 50%. Those are some of the most bearish figures that we've heard. What would be the cause, I guess, of this bubble to burst?
Well, there'd be two things. Interest rates rising, which you already brought up, but that doesn't look like it's imminent anytime soon.
Yeah.
The more likely immediate cause would be a recession. And recession, the reason recession would cause a problem is the incomes would drop in a recession. And already Toronto's like 6-7 times income in terms of the value of housing and therefore the borrowing. And without incomes, people just can't afford to keep their houses. They can't afford to buy new houses. And some of them will even get into a position where they can't even afford to keep the house they have.
Do you think that Canada's headed toward a recession?
Oh, for sure. I mean, we've had recessions. We've had recessions every 4 or 5 years since the Second World War. And it's been over 5 years since we had the last recession. So there's always a recession coming. Now, sometimes when you've just had one, the recession is 5 years away. But when it's been, are a much better longer-term investment than a leveraged bet on housing.
Okay, fair enough. So what advice, the most important part for our viewers here, what advice do you have for prospective buyers or sellers in the marketplace at this point?
Well, there's different people, you know, and everybody's situation is different, but people that are highly levered in real estate, I would encourage them to sell and pay down the debt because it's not going to be fun for them. Older people like myself who probably have their mortgage paid down or paid off completely, their concern should be more about, there's a large part of the investment world in Canada in the stock market that's tied to real estate. The Canadian financial sector, for example, is the biggest sector. And it's also very tied to household lending. So it's important to diversify away from those sectors that are tied to housing if housing bubble bursts. And I would say beyond that, even look outside Canada, because the Canadian market is very much financials, energy, and materials. And there's a whole world of investments outside of that, which means you have to look outside of Canada.
So I guess fundamentally you're saying maybe pick up the phone and contact a financial advisor.
Exactly.
ASAP.
Yes, exactly. That's it.
Coincidentally. So where can people find the book?
Well, it's online, Amazon, Chapters, Indigo. It's in all the best bookstores. So.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Hilliard. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.